During dark days of the Great Depression, people gathered from all over the country to a remote desert location. Some came to face the challenge of a lifetime, others just to find a job. They all made a legend, Hoover Dam. It's been called the American Nile. The Colorado River is a twisting, verdant ribbon of water in an arid land. For eons, it remained an untamed beauty, alluring, yet just beyond reach. Like the Nile, the Colorado River flows down out of the Continental Divide and through a scorching desert to its outlet at the sea. Early explorers had different and sometimes odd perceptions of the river. Maps showed it disappearing underground and re-emerging. One explorer ran his steamboat aground in Black Canyon and so decided that he had found the headwaters of the river. People had lived along the river for decades without really ever knowing much about it. It wasn't until 1869 that John Wesley Powell made a full descent of the river and mapped its course for the first time. Although his expedition was fairly well planned, Powell and his men had no way of knowing what they'd find along the river. Plagued by accidents and desertions, the expedition was nevertheless a success. The gaps that Powell's expedition filled on the maps of the time caused great excitement, but did little to improve life along the river itself. It did open the area up to further exploration and survey that gave vital information to the future designers of Hoover Dam. Interest in water development in the Colorado began before the turn of the century. Farmers downstream in the rich farm country of Southern California saw abundant potential in the Colorado River if it could be brought under control. Early attempts to control the river ended in disaster when the flooding river broke a levee in the spring of 1905 and flooded the Imperial Valley, creating the Salton Sea. Herbert Hoover, then Secretary of Commerce, hand-carried legislation through Congress and made the dam a political reality. It wasn't an easy job. In 1928, Congress passed the bill which created the Boulder Canyon Project Act. The dam was designed by the Bureau of Reclamation, a part of the Department of Interior. Contracts were signed with 6 combined companies to actually build the dam.
I came to Boulder City to try to become an author. I wanted to write things that would have an impact on people. 1929 in January, I arrived in Vegas and waited for a couple of years in Vegas until the appropriation money was okayed by Congress for the start in 1931.
And before we started too much in Boulder, well, we went down on the riverbank that'd be upstream from the dam and built a camp, a temporary camp. And that was built up on the side of the rocks for the single men, and there wasn't any homes down there, but there was a lot of people that moved down there on account of the water of the river that had tar paper shacks and tents and quite a desperate scenery, really.
First, they camped down at the river, lived in Las Vegas, strung out up Bootleg Canyon. Desert dwelling was not comfortable. It was growing hot. After March 1931, the heat became terrific, one of the hottest summers this area has had. So the people lived in these various places until 6 companies had built the hundreds of houses here, and the government, the houses around the upper rim of the town for the federal people.
Construction on the dam began in 1931. When people heard about jobs at Hoover Dam, workers came from all over the country. Most of the workers were paid $4 a day. It's not very much by today's standards, but it was an excellent wage during the Depression years.
All kinds of people came, from common workers to executives, business people who had gone broke in the Depression, came looking for something to tide them over so they could later bring their family here, hopefully.
I arrived in Vegas the day before Labor Day, but my first work day was Labor Day. They didn't have any holidays except Christmas. They just worked 7 days a week.
$4 a day and up. Some technical work, of course, was paid more than $4. It went up to $5 after a while, but in those days, people felt lucky to get work at all, many of them.
One of the first construction priorities was a town built on a mountain 8 miles away from the site of the dam. Boulder City was different from the camps found at previous construction sites. The town had a basic design and was constructed with some permanence in mind. The original plan was rather elaborate, including ring roads and green belts between all the city blocks. The story goes that Frank Crow, the brusque, businesslike supervisor of Hoover Construction, swept the plans aside. He couldn't be bothered with niceties. His business was building dams. Despite drastic changes in the plan, Boulder City still retained many of the parkways and green belts of the original design.
There was a lot of men looking for homes, and they was building houses at that time, about 7 a day. And Mrs. Wixon and I got a house within a week or 10 days, and we moved in before there was any steps to get up in it, and glad to get the house. And Mrs. Wixon got stuck with a 1931 Ford Model A car, and I came home while she was stuck in the sand. She and I had a boy about 4 months old that had to walk uptown, and she could tell you something about her hard and stark times. But it was all a primitive deal, a lot of rattlesnakes and centipedes, but everybody was pretty congenial and was happy to be working.
The first thing I did was to buy some work shoes, which I'd never seen in my life. And my first job was restacking lumber. They had a stack of lumber out there in the middle of nowhere, and they wanted restacked. So I restacked the lumber. And when the whistle blew at 9 o'clock, they have several dinners, breakfasts. And when the whistle blew at 9, I thought it was time for lunch. I soon found out, though.
The recreation center was built on Birch Street by the Six Companies Corporation. That recreation center had pool tables. Frank Moran, an important heavyweight contender, was in charge of that recreation center. He brought in, I believe it was Jack Jeffries, a fighter, and they put on a fight. It was a sham, of course. At their age, it wasn't the real fight, but they put on an exhibition. The men would go to Railroad Pass if and when they had the time to do it, working 7 days a week. They would go to Railroad Pass and get their entertainment there or in Las Vegas.
Vegas was quite wild, really wild. They had gambling, drinking. We still had prohibition, but you could get all the beer and all the whiskey you wanted in Vegas.
The gate between here and Railroad Pass was manned by federal rangers under the direction of the Chief Ranger, Bud Bedell. Everyone driving in to the reservation past that gate was stopped for several years. If they had a liquor bottle, it was commandeered and there was trouble. People learned that if they had a bottle of liquor half used, they better finish it, and then they would toss the bottle into the desert before they got to the gate. The desert became cluttered with glass.
Several sites were reviewed as places to build Hoover Dam. The only suitable site was Black Canyon on the Arizona and Nevada border, near Las Vegas, Nevada. Many people call the dam Boulder Dam because it was originally designed to be built in Boulder Canyon, several miles upstream. But that site was abandoned as the project began. The workers began clearing roads and building plants to make the tools and form the materials needed to build the dam. It was impossible to haul big items like penstock sections overland, so they were made at the dam site. Every day, workers were hauled to and from the dam site in specially made trucks and cars. The area where the dam was to be built needed to be cleared of rocks and dirt so that the base would be firm and strong. Workers called high scalers used ropes to lower themselves over the sides of the cliffs to place explosives to blow the rocks away. When the charges were set, the high scalers cleared out and the charges were set off. After the explosions, the high scalers climbed back down and pried rocks loose, letting them fall to the river below.
High scaling, there's no question about it. It was a hazardous situation. And it was something, well, I suppose maybe you're a little familiar with it, but it was men out there on ropes, swinging around on the canyon wall. And their job, they had to do a certain amount of drilling and a certain amount of shooting to get them rocks off of that canyon wall, which would make it safe when we got down in below. And to do that, well, they had what they called a Bolson chair. They set in this Bolson chair, and it was a 2x12, about 2 foot, and a seat on it, and some ropes, and this rope, they could had a knot there that you'd go up and down with. They'd go swing from one place to the other. They had to get their air hose in there because they had some drilling to do and the blowing out the holes and the dynamiting, and they're up there some 700 feet. That's quite a little story. There isn't everybody can do that, you know. But those boys got used to it, and I remember one time we lost 2 men, looked up and heard something going on, and here comes 2 men tumbling down off of the canyon wall. But at the same time, we noticed a hose that was blowing, and there's a 2-inch air line that blowed, and it blowed them off of them canyon walls. And they hit right down on the bottom, and of course that was the end of that was 2 of our casualties. It was a hazardous situation.
The high scalers and the powder monkeys had dangerous work. Truck drivers had dangerous work in areas that were rock slopes. A truck driver who had a giant truck and who needed at times to step out of his seat and stand up on a special sort of rack and steer with his toe for a brief period of time. He was doing dangerous work.
I've already mentioned how hazardous it is from sitting on those Bolson chairs and swinging around. And there was one time a fellow, government inspector, was up above, and the fellow in the Bolson chair down below him some 10 feet or so, or whatever. And as he come falling, this fellow swung around and grabbed him right around the waist and saved his life.
I didn't hang from the cliff, so I don't know. But I did hang from the face of the dam, and I never considered that dangerous.
While the high scalers were doing their work, men were tunneling inside the cliffs to prepare a place for the river to flow while the dam was being built. These tunnels were over 4,000 feet long and 5 stories high.
Any tunnel, and fact of the matter is construction as a whole, is known to be a hazardous occupation, and particularly tunnel work. Your workman's compensation runs double in tunnel work than it does any normal construction outside work. Those tunnels being 56 foot in diameter was the largest tunnels. It was even larger than your imagination. So it had to be did, and it was dangerous, even though we lost a very few lives in the, and I say a few lives in the tunnel. But we barred it down, had a scaling outfit behind, and everything was did as safe as we knew how.
When the diversion tunnels were finished, a short blast opened the tunnels for the water's flow. A dam of earth and rock was quickly built on the river, forcing the water out of its bed for the first time. A second dam was built downstream to keep the water from backing up into the construction site. Then the area between the two dams was pumped dry. Now workers could scour and chip away at the rock to clear the surface for the first concrete to be poured.
This hard hat is similar to those that were worn by the workers in the dangerous work in the canyon to protect them from rocks and things that might fall on their heads. I used this one so that I could go through the canyon when it was actively dangerous with the falling rocks. One time, C.A. Bisbee and I went the full length of the canyon while they were working. We were not authorized to, but we did it. But I had the hard hat, and I felt protected.
Several plants for mixing concrete were built near the dam so that it could speed up the operation. A constant parade of electric trains carried buckets full of concrete to the dam site and brought empty buckets back. The concrete flowed like Colorado River water. On June 6, 1933, 2 years after construction began, the first bucket of concrete was laid in the structure of the dam. So the race to build Hoover Dam had begun. The race would end 3 years later with the completion of the dam. Forms were set in a checkerboard pattern to add strength to the structure. Concrete was poured in 5-foot lifts or pours to make handling the buckets easier and safer. If someone fell into the concrete, everything would stop until the person was pulled out. No one is buried in Hoover Dam. Because there was so much concrete, it would have taken nearly 60 years to dry. To speed things up, an ice plant was built downstream from the dam, and ice water was pumped through pipes to cool the concrete. Workmen known as paddlers used power tools, shovels, and even their feet to push the concrete around the pipes to cool it. To fill the lower forms, buckets were hauled out on trains. These trains were run on tracks anchored to the canyon wall. Later, huge buckets with releasable bottoms would be slung out on cables from the canyon rim from over 800 feet above the river level.
When you get that kind of bunch of men in the canyon, you can't have somebody knocking rock off of the canyon wall and the other guy down below where the rock has fallen. So that work has got to be synchronized as to who's where and what's going on. There was somebody ahead of building Hoover Dam. His name was Frank Crow. There's lots of things going on, but synchronizing that work was the power, the supervisors under Frank Crow and Woody Williams.
Frank Crow was hired by the 6 Companies Incorporated conglomerate to head the staff building the dam, doing the actual work, subject to the complete overseeing of the Bureau of Reclamation staff under Walker Young.
He was a strong, silent type. I have said in the paper that I didn't like Crow, but really, he was quite a likable man, but he didn't have much to say.
Frank Crow was a very fair man to work for. There's only one thing: you got to perform your duty and perform what you're supposed to be out there for. And he can be outspoken when he has to be, and at his position there's times that you have to be. And so this one particular story, why Frank Crow was down there this was on the Hoover Dam, of course, see. And the guy backed up to dump. When he dumped, well, he didn't have anything in his truck. Forgot to get a load. He thought he had a load. He's kind of daydreaming, I suppose. And so Frank got out and he got a little perturbed about the deal, and he fired him. And then he got to thinking about that, and so he followed him for a little ways, and he said, go back and get on that truck. And so the story was, he says, well, them kind of boys, they do better, but rather than fire him, he'd probably make one of the better truck drivers. So everything was kind of human, you know. That it wasn't what a lot of people thinks, rough and tumble and fisted and so on. We was all a congenial bunch of employees with quite a few problems, but everything got done very well.
During the height of construction, over 5,000 men worked on Hoover Dam at one time. These men worked day and night all year long in every season of the year. Summer was the hardest, since temperatures at the construction site were sometimes higher than 130 degrees. 96 people died during the construction of the dam, and many of them died from the heat. As work on the body of the dam was underway, penstocks or huge pipes were built in sections at plants nearby. These sections were lowered into a tunnel in the canyon wall and bolted together so that the water could flow through them into the electrical powerhouses that were constructed just below the dam. Electrical power generation was an afterthought at Hoover Dam. It was only included in later versions of the design and not even mentioned in original drafts of the bill. The men who designed the dam envisioned electrical power as a way to have Hoover Dam pay for itself. The body of the dam was nearing completion when construction of the powerhouses began. Huge towers were built on shelves carved into the canyon walls. These intake towers are used to draw water out of the reservoir and down through the penstocks to turn the turbines to generate electricity. Records were being set and broken in the placement of nearly 3.5 million cubic yards of concrete. That's enough concrete to build a 2-lane highway from New York to San Francisco. The dam was approaching its full height of 726 feet. Its 45-foot thick crest arched out 1,244 feet from the canyon wall on the Nevada side to the canyon wall on the Arizona side. At its base, Hoover Dam was 660 feet thick, equivalent to more than the length of 2 football fields. Hoover Dam weighs more than 6,600,000 tons. A main highway crosses the dam, providing the first stable roadway to cross the river for hundreds of miles in either direction. Spillways were built on either side of the dam to carry water safely around the dam if floodwaters filled the reservoir too full. They work like a bathtub overflow. They've only been used once for a real flood. No water has ever gone over or through the dam. All the water is carried around the dam. Now the dam stood completed, ahead of schedule, and for less money than planned. Much of its beauty was being slowly covered by the rising waters of Lake Mead. Its size and impressive form were breathtaking, especially at a time when such structures were very rare. Visitors came from all around to see the new dam. 6 years after its start, Hoover Dam was finished. President Franklin D. Roosevelt dedicated the dam in September 1936.
And of course, the story behind that was it was Hoover Dam when Hoover was president, and then when Roosevelt got in, why, he dedicated it as Boulder Dam, and he kind of expressed it, Boulder Dam. But then when Harry Truman got in, why, he renamed it back to where it was supposed to be officially, to Hoover Dam.
Today, Hoover Dam is as impressive as ever. In an age of wonders, Hoover Dam remains one of the wonders of the world. Its gravity arch design has held tons of water for over 50 years. It has accomplished its primary purpose of controlling the flow of the Colorado River. Hoover Dam marked the beginning of development in the Southwest. Until it was constructed, the water was useless to the farms, towns, and cities of the desert Southwest. Now the desert has yielded volumes of produce and fruit unimaginable before. Lake Mead waters have become a magnet for Americans seeking recreation. And the electrical power lights whole cities in California and Arizona. The economic benefits vastly outweigh the $150 million that was appropriated by Congress to build Hoover Dam, and it's more than paid for itself through the sale of electricity alone. The strength and beauty of Hoover Dam demonstrates the industry and intelligence of modern man. New technologies have been developed since its construction, yet the energy and techniques of the time were enough to construct a dam that is even a marvel in our time. Hoover Dam stands today as a testament to the courage and perseverance of its builders.